Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is U.S. bureaucrats and their role in spiking the tensions between the United States and Israel. The tensions that have emerged between two once great allies, Israel and the United States, are blindingly obvious. Mass media has pointed out, discussed, and dissected the divisions with such fervor and frequency that no one can claim ignorance of the break between the two countries, often referred to as siblings. The United States as the big brother and Israel as the little brother. Friends argue, allies disagree, siblings have rivalries, but these broken lines of communication between Israel and the United States is all that and much more. It is unprecedented. Tensions have risen to such a fervor that it is literally a pitch that Biden's White House has stopped commenting, while Netanyahu can't seem to stop himself from commenting at the same time. Well, this public spat between the United States and Israel could not have come at the worst time in Israel's history. It is happening in part because there was one of the worst times in Israel's history, period. Israel has been waging war against Hamas for 3/4 of a year. In the annals of Israeli military tradition, that is a very long time. There is a continued saber-rattling by Hezbollah. There are aerial attacks from Yemen's Houthis. Iran has become emboldened in their bellicose actions and aggressive plans for the Middle East. The region, the Middle East, is a tinderbox, and while the region is always a tinderbox, now it really feels more likely to ignite and thrust a number of parties into far-reaching, all-out, extended conflict than at any point since the creation of the Jewish state. And Israel stands strong and proud, but Israel stands alone. The United States, of course, does not want an expanded regional war, with Iran calling all the plays while China and Russia cheer them on from the sidelines and maybe even get involved a little bit. Israel certainly does not want a regional war. Israel does not want to be the central target of a regional war. And Israel certainly does not want to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. But should there be regional war, do not for a moment think that because the United States has been distanced from Israel, that the United States will not come under attack as well. In the regional war, the United States will be the focus of attacks locally. The standing of the United States will be challenged on the world stage. Iran, Russia, and China will assert their roles, and the United States will be forced into the conflict. After all, the United States represents the West and represents democracies world over. The United States represents everything that those who would be at war with Israel despise. Remember when back in October, President Biden gave full-throat support to Israel in their war against Hamas? He even visited Israel during the first stages of the war. Fast forward to now, and we have Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, publicly chastising Washington for not providing Israel with much-needed weaponry, a claim the Biden administration denies. They are both correct. The White House is on record as having slowed down a single delivery of rockets to Israel because the United States disagreed with Israel's plan of attack in Rafah, what we used to call Rafiah. In their worldview, too many Gazan non-combatants were being killed by Israeli airstrikes. Immediately after the Hamas massacre of October 7th, the United States expedited shipments to Israel, as per Israel's request. Israel was getting weapons and getting much needed restocks quickly, very quickly, almost immediately. But for some unexplained reason, the schedule changed. Arms transfers reverted back to the traditional schedule, and that schedule can best be compared to the proverbial slow boat to China. Congress has allocated the weapons. Non-delivery is a violation of federal law. So what is happening? Why did the schedule revert back, especially in Israel's wartime of need? The answer is far more sinister than one would expect. The best explanation is that bureaucrats in the United States Department of Defense are slowing down the process. Yes, bureaucrats who are at odds with the Biden administration's support of Israel. Professional hacks who disagree with Israel's war against Hamas are sabotaging the delivery of essential weapons to Israel. The same people who have always worked to sabotage the relationship between the United States and Israel. Bluntly put, they are anti-Israel. Another reason given to explain the slowdown is that it's political. Viable, but totally unlikely. It's too easy to check the White House on this. The White House was not in denial mode when they did deliberately slow down the earlier rocket delivery that I spoke about. And there is no political upside for the White House to slow down weapons and not claim responsibility for slowing it down, which is why they claim responsibility in the first place. The only reason to hold back weapons for Israel is if it would garner political support. And in this case, it is crystal clear to the voting constituencies around Detroit, Michigan, let's say, who reject the special relationship between the United States and Israel, that holding back weapons would not directly translate into political support. Biden has already lost their vote. An anti-Israel, anti-Jewish culture has long permeated certain corridors of the Defense Department, as well as the State Department. Believe me, I know this personally. These bureaucrats have been at odds with the policies of sitting presidents and their political appointees. The attitude of the professional bureaucrat was and still is that they are there to stay, while political appointees and the president rotate in and out. That is where the real tension exists. Israel knows it. The White House knows it. That is why Netanyahu went public on social media and in interviews. He was putting pressure on the White House to rein in their bureaucrats in the Department of Defense. Getting those weapons quickly is as important as making certain that Israel and the United States are in step with one another. Without a united front, without an excellent U.S.-Israel relationship, the safety of the Middle East, even the security of the world, is at stake. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a column from the Allgemeiner. It was originally reported and published in Honest Reporting. Both sites are chock full of video of the hateful attack against the Jewish community in LA, Los Angeles. The column is entitled, Media Distorts Mob Attack on Los Angeles Synagogue with Both Sides Slander. And it was written by Rachel Donahue. This was published on June 28, 2024. This is how she begins. The footage is as clear as day. A mob of anti-Israel protesters, some with keffiyehs and black masks, wrapped around their faces, assault visibly observant Jews, and then clash with riot police. In one clip, posted on the social media site X, formerly known as Twitter, a visibly observant Jew is attacked, and in another, several men with skull caps try to pull one of the rioters away from an ultra-Orthodox man. A journalist at the scene described Jews being sprayed with pepper spray, and another recounted seeing Jews being pushed down and beaten bloody in the street. Armed with sticks and waving PLO flags, the mob massed outside the Addis Torah Synagogue in Los Angeles for their anti-Israel rally on Sunday. Reports suggest the location was chosen because it was hosting an Israeli real estate fair. But it's clear that most of the mob was there because it was a synagogue, evident when the keffiyeh-clad crew linked arms around the building to prevent synagogue attendees from entering. California Governor Gavin Newsom condemned the disturbing scenes. The violent clash outside the Addis Torah Synagogue in Los Angeles are appalling. There is no excuse for targeting a house of worship. He posted on X, adding, "Such anti-Semitic hatred has no place in California." The author now shows that California politicians, not just Gavin Newsom, but others, said the correct things, but did nothing beyond that. She writes, California Congressman Ted Lieu also commented, describing the incident as anti-Semitic and calling for the prosecution of people who targeted the synagogue. Now Rachel Donahue condemns the media for being even-handed, correctly asking how a story about attacking Jews and the synagogue could have two sides. She writes, "Yet for some reasons unknown, much of the media was quick to use the both sides narrative and create a moral equivalency between the mob and their Jewish targets. The press refused to describe the incident as anything but exactly what it was, an anti-Semitic attack by a baying anti-Israel mob. The Los Angeles Times, for example, described what occurred as a violent clash in a headline that reported the presence of one protester carrying a spiked flag, while CNN said violent scuffles had erupted outside without stating which group was responsible for the violence. CBS News had the gall to claim that the counter-protesters who had assembled to protect the synagogue and its congregants from the attack were taking part in the dueling protests. The same report also attempted to imply that anti-Semitic rioters were the victims in the incident, with a CBS journalist saying that one side was simply demanding a ceasefire and decrying Israeli policies towards Palestinians, and pro-Israel groups countered them verbally and physically. Rachel Donahue correctly concludes by stating the clear facts, and she writes them clearly. These are the facts, she writes. Jews were attacked at a synagogue. They were attacked by anti-Semitic thugs because they are Jews. This wasn't about Israel. It wasn't about Palestinians. There are no two sides to this story. Shame on the media for pretending there was. So correct. Thank you, Rachel Donahue. It is essential that we call out our leaders and the media when they make these awful errors, and the terrible slant of the news that they have is just irresponsible. It's our responsibility to correct them. Next up is a column by Judith Katz from Ynet, published on June 29, 2024. The column is entitled, "Yes to Life in Spite of Everything, and Especially Now," subtitled Opinion. Here's a hopeful question everyone can ask themselves. What would you like to say about this period of time in 10 years? Can we ask what small things can we do to build a better life? Katz tries to help us garner some perspective, some positive elements after the October 7th atrocity. She's not trying to sugarcoat the hellishness, but she's trying to help us manage the horror that all lovers of Israel felt and continue to feel. This is how she begins. A few months after October 7th massacre, the elderly from Kibbutz Kfar Aza called me, ages 65, 78, 90. They have no home. Each has lost something. One lost a child, a grandchild, another's son is kidnapped. They asked me to meet them for a lecture. And what do they want me to talk about? Not trauma, not anxiety, not anger or loss. They want to talk about habits. I asked, what habits? What about everything that happened? And they, who have lost everything, say, don't worry, we're on it. But we're also looking for content that will help us go on living. Katz quotes the great behavioral psychiatrist, Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl. She writes, I arrived for the lecture and they talked to me seriously about eating too much sugar, spending too much time on their phones, wanting to read more, and meeting friends. The encounter stays with me. How they, even they, want to keep living. Viktor Frankl called it yes to life in spite of everything. I think we're all asking this question now. Can we choose life despite everything? Viktor Frankl, who also wrote, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Katz provides a question and a path to growth, to put the October 7th massacre into our lives in order to help us manage. She writes, so here's a helpful question everyone can ask themselves. If we fast forward 10 years, what would you like to say about this time? I'd like to say we found a way to talk to each other even when we disagree. I'd like to say that I understand what really matters to me, how I want to live, that I understand why this is my home, that our security was strengthened, that we didn't leave anyone behind. Each of you has an answer to this question, and from it, the next question arises. What do I need to do today, tomorrow, this month, this year, so that in 10 years it will be true? What's on me to create a better future? Maybe to apologize, listen fully, drive differently, share how I feel. Katz concludes explaining that growth is very difficult. She uses the image of a shattered mirror. She writes, growth is like a shattered mirror. You can glue it together and then look at it yourself through the many cracks and fragments, or create a new piece of art from it. Growth doesn't come from trying to restore reality to what it was before, or repressing, ignoring, and forgetting what happened. Growth comes from accepting that what happened, happened, and asking what can be done with it from here. It's on us, every person, and all of us together. No one else will come, and we can choose hope and say yes to life despite everything. If they can in Kfar Aza, so can we, everyone. Excellent piece. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I'm going to show you 9 cartoons today. These first 3 cartoons are from London. They depict Israel in a very dark and ugly light. This first cartoon is Gaza Destroyed. A fighter jet with the Star of David flies over a totally destroyed Gaza. It's a very glim and grim cartoon. This next cartoon is also from London. Bibi Netanyahu is in a wheelchair, but when you look carefully, it's actually a tank. Bibi is shooting, and yes, he's looking infirmed and old, but still shooting. A very negative cartoon. Next up is called Endless Cycle, how Israel is grinding up Gaza and going round and round and round in the grinder, a meat grinder. And the meat is obviously the Gazans. Next up is a cartoon about elections in Iran, which are going into a runoff in July, on July 8th. The cartoon has 3 sitting Iranians essentially saying, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. The expression is about the 3 monkeys. It's a Japanese maxim. Actually in Japanese it's Mizaru, Mikazaru, and Mazaru. It sounds much better in Japanese. Next up is a cartoon about Gaza. An Israeli tank is just circling dead bodies and a tent with bomb holes in the ground. Next up is about Israel's internal politics and how insecure Bibi's coalition is. Bibi is sitting on a very rickety coalition chair, saying, I blame everyone else. Next up is a cartoon, and it's extremely biting. The helmet is a skull, and they're searching for war crimes against humanity. Israel is on the skull. Next up is a cartoon that depicts Biden ensnarled in a kite string. The kite is Israel's relations. Biden is depicted as a little child who is totally tied up in knots in relations with Israel. And finally, this cartoon has universities asking how they got caught up in the middle between Free Palestine and Stand with Israel. It's true, they are stuck between the two. But the reason is that the leadership of the universities were bent over backwards embracing freedom of expression, which attacked Jews. They made a serious mistake. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. The IDF reported that Israeli forces from the 12th Brigade, operating under the 167th 2nd Division in Rafah, in southern Gaza Strip, discovered shafts leading to a 500-meter-long tunnel, a network system near an UNRWA school, a United Nations school. The tunnels were being examined by the Yahalom Combat Engineering Unit, and meanwhile, the 931st Battalion from the Nacha Brigade found 9 rocket launches and sites in the Rafah area. The government approved the appointment of Knesset member Dani Danon to the position of Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. Danon, who has previously served in this position, will serve a 2nd term after unanimous approval from the government. The Palestinian Authority embassy in Cairo estimated that 115,000 Gazans have crossed the border into Egypt since the beginning of the war after the events of October 7th. The Washington Post reported, despite the Egyptian policy not to accept Palestinian refugees, according to a report, several thousands were treated in the hospital in Egypt, but most of the refugees arrived with the help of foreign embassies or as tourists and remained there without official refugee status. Foreign Minister Israel Katz wrote a post on X, which is formerly Twitter, on his account in response to Iran's threats to destroy Israel. He wrote, "A regime that threatens destruction deserves to be destroyed. If Hezbollah does not cease its fire and withdraw from southern Lebanon, we will act against it with full force until security is restored and residents can return to their homes," Katz added. Iran will hold runoff elections for president in July, as no candidate secured the required 50% of the vote. The Interior Ministry said low-key moderate Masoud Pezeshkian got 10 million of the 24 million votes counted, while Saeed Jalili got just under 10 million, according to a ministry spokesperson. So Iran will hold the runoff for presidential election, pitting a little-known reformist against a hard-line former nuclear negotiator after the results were released and showed a very low participation, actually the lowest ever coming out to vote. More than 60% of the votes cast no ballot, the race that saw the reformists against a conservative. Two American officials said that since October 7th, the United States has transferred to Israel at least 14,000 Mk-84 bombs, and they weigh 2,000 pounds each. 6,500 bombs weighing 500 pounds each, 3,000 guided air-to-surface Hellfire missiles, and 1,000 bunker-penetrating bombs, 2,600 bunker-penetrating smart bombs that are dropped from the air, and additional ammunition also. The source did not specify when the weapons were transferred, but according to Reuters, this indicates that there has been no significant decrease in American aid to Israel despite international calls to limit the supply of weapons, and despite Bibi Netanyahu saying that there has been. Hezbollah claims responsibility for launching a swarm of attack drones at Israel. This is the terrorist organization's sixth claim of that responsibility. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that this video was actually posted 6 years ago to YouTube, and it's so appropriate today? It asks, what have you done? The short film asserts that at some point in your life, you will need somebody to stand by you. In the beginning, in the background, we hear Benny King's classic song, Stand By Me. The short video shows Israel saving people all over the world, helping others all over when they are in need. Because Israel stands by those in need, no matter where. This was a very powerful video.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. Oh, I won't be afraid. just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me. If the sky that we look upon should tumble and fall, or the mountain should crumble to the sea, I won't cry, I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. I stand by me. I stand now. Stand by me. Whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me? I stand by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me.
This is what Israel does. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.